Okay, now let's take a look at an example of a component that uses asynchronous operations. So in this folder, let's take a look at our to-dos component. So here in ng on init, we're subscribing to this observable returned from our service. What if this service returned a promise instead of an observable? Let's have a look. So I'm going to duplicate this line and comment out the first one. And then I'm going to change this to call get to-dos promise. This is another method I have defined in the service that returns the result as a promise. And here we need to change subscribe to then. Okay, now let's go to our spec file, to-dos.component.spec. So here's our test. It should load to-dos from the server. So let's modify it line by line. We get the service, we put a spy on get to-dos promise and return value. Now here, instead of an observable, I'm going to return a promise. So promise.resolve an array of 3 items, 1, 2, 3. Then we detect the changes and finally expect that we have 3 to-do items. Save. Let's take a look at the terminal. Okay, our test failed. And here's the error. Expected 0 to be 3. What's happening here? I want to show you exactly what is happening under the hood. So after this expectation, I'm going to add console.log expect was called. Now let's go back to our component. I'm also going to add a console.log here. So I'm going to change this callback function, turn it into a block, and add console.log then was called. Now let's look at the result in the terminal. Note the order of log messages in the terminal. So first we have expect was called, and then we have then was called. So this proves that this line is executed after our test function, after our expectation. And that's why we have 0 items in our to-dos array at the time we executed our assertion. The reason this is happening is because this callback function is not executed immediately. It's put in a queue, and the JavaScript execution engine will look at that queue after the current thread of execution unwinds. In other words, the JavaScript engine first executes this function, and as part of executing this function, it will queue up this function that we have passed here. The same happens when we use a timer. So if here we had set timeout, this callback function here will not be executed immediately. It will be queued, and then it will be executed after our test function. Now, how come we didn't have this problem when using an observable? Because the callback function we pass to the subscribe method is executed immediately. So even though we know that data in the observable is going to arrive in the future, we're going to subscribe to it immediately. So now let me show you how to fix this problem. Back to our test, I'm going to delete this console.log. Now here, I'm going to wrap our test function here with the async function of Angular. You have seen async before, remember? Look, in our first before each block, we have this async function, and this comes with Angular. So I'm going to wrap our test function with async. Back here, async, open parentheses, close parentheses. Now, we want to delay the execution of this line until the asynchronous operations in our component are completed. So, to do that, we use fixture dot when stable. This method returns a promise that is resolved when all the asynchronous operations in our component are completed. So, then here we pass a callback function, and then we move our assertion right here. Save. All our tests are passing. So this is one way to solve this problem. But there is also another way. Instead of async here, we can use fake async. Now we need to import this on the top. So on the first line, I'm going to import fake async. And I'm also going to import another function called tick. You're going to see that in a second. So both these functions are defined in Angular/core/testing module. Now, with fake async, we don't need this fixture .when stable. So we can take this expect out of this block and put it here. So this gives our test a linear style. Now, before calling this expect function, we need to call tick, and this simulates the passage of time. So, if you're using asynchronous operations in your components, you should wrap your test function with async or fake async. Which one you choose is a matter of personal preference. And this brings us to the end of this section. I hope you enjoyed this section, and thank you for watching.